40 feet underground, darkness doesn't blind you, it devours you. Declan and Wyatt set out to map a dead-end limestone fissure in the Appalachians. What they found instead, after crawling through a suffocating rock tunnel, was a multi-million-dollar secret that nearly became their grave. The Appalachian Mountains guard secrets older than human memory. Millions of tons of limestone and shale pressed down on them like a sealed vault. For Declan Hayes, 32, structural engineer, veteran caver, those mountains were sacred ground. For his younger brother Wyatt, they were a Hail Mary. Mid-November, the kind of raw, overcast afternoon where cold doesn't touch your skin, it settles into your marrow. Blackwood Ridge, West Virginia. The trees had surrendered every last leaf, laying bare a landscape of sharp edges and unforgiving rock. Wyatt had pulled Declan and their friend Chloe Bennett, a hydrologist who charted underground water systems for the state, out to a remote set of coordinates he'd dug up in the basement of the county archives. Wyatt was drowning. A failed contracting business had dragged him $60,000 underwater. The people holding those loans did not send polite reminders. A week earlier, he'd unearthed a forgotten Surveyor's journal from 1928. It belonged to a man named Thomas Sterling. Sterling had documented a massive, hollow acoustic anomaly, unusual geological carvings near a dried-up tributary, and then cryptic, half-unhinged notes about a hidden cache, stashed by Appalachian moonshiners and corrupt local bankers during Prohibition. Declan had told him when they'd parked the truck 3 miles back at the logging road. "I'm chasing a lifeline, Deck." Wyatt's eyes were bloodshot, frantic. Now the three of them stood at the coordinates, staring at Wyatt's grand salvation. It wasn't a cave entrance, it was a fissure, a jagged, dark wound in the bedrock, no wider than a mailbox slot. Quote, _3, __. Chloe's breath hung white in the frozen air. She shifted the heavy coil of static rope on her shoulders, eyeing the crack with undisguised doubt. "Wyatt, a badger couldn't squeeze through that." Sterling said the entrance was narrow. "A squeeze," Wyatt pressed, dropping to his knees. He aimed his heavy-duty tactical flashlight into the void. The beam vanished into total blackness. Air drifted up from the hole, ancient, foul. A metallic tang of wet earth and water that hadn't moved in decades. Declan crouched beside him and studied the limestone edges. He dropped a small pebble inside. Silence. 1 second, 2, 3. Click, clack, thud. Not a straight drop. The fissure angled downward a brutal 45 degrees before striking something solid. Quote 7. Declan murmured, his engineer's mind already running calculations. Feed first entry on a belay. But if it narrows even half an inch, you're pinned. Panic and expand your chest. Your ribs lock against the stone. You suffocate before I can rig a haul system. "I'm going," Wyatt said. He was already threading his climbing harness. "No, you're not." Declan seized his brother's shoulder. Quote, _11 _ Chloe nodded. Her face was drained of color but locked in focus. She anchored the primary line to a massive oak rooted deep behind them. Checked the carabiners once, checked them again. Declan pulled on his helmet, snapped his headlamp to life, and lowered himself flat on his back. The opening was so constricted, he had to turn his head sideways just to slide his shoulders past the lip of rock. The instant stone closed around him, the temperature dropped. Gone, the sounds of the woods, the wind, the open sky, all replaced by one sound. His own ragged breathing, bouncing off limestone inches from his face. Quote, _12 _ Declan called up, his voice already muffled. He shimmied downward, inch by agonizing inch. 10 feet in, the ceiling scraped the nose of his helmet. The limestone wept, slick with a fine film of subterranean mud. Pressure bore down on his chest like a closing fist. Each exhale sent his body inching downward, but every inhale crushed his sternum against unforgiving rock above. Quote, _13 _ Chloe's voice floated down, impossibly distant. "Tight," Declan grunted. "Real tight, pushing through a bottleneck." At 20 feet, Raw panic clawed at his throat. Cavers had a name for this. The devil's windpipe. The fissure squeezed inward, demanding he blow every last molecule of air from his lungs just to grind his hips past a jagged pinch point. His heavy canvas coveralls shredded against a sharp lip of stone. For 10 unbearable seconds, total, absolute entrapment. The primitive terror of live burial detonated behind his eyes. 16, he commanded himself. He worked his right shoulder sideways, a millimeter of movement. He drove hard with both boots. A nauseating scrape of fabric and flesh against rock. Then he popped free, sliding another 10 feet down. 1-8. Wyatt's shout echoed from above. See anything? At 35 feet, the stone transformed. Jagged, fractured limestone gave way to something smooth. Declan dragged his gloved fingers across the wall. Perfectly flat. Chiseled clean. This rock, he panted into the black. It's been worked. Somebody widened this passage by hand. Are you serious? Wyatt's voice splintered with excitement. __quote _23 __. He kicked both legs out into nothingness. Carefully rotating his body over the stone lip, he released, dropped the final 5 feet. His boots struck solid ground with a deep, reverberating boom. He straightened up, pulse slamming against his ribs, and swept his headlamp across the dark. The beam sliced through dead, motionless air and landed on something that had no right to exist. Declan's voice shook as he stared at the impossible. Get down here! The descent nearly broke Wyatt. He locked up at the 20-foot bottleneck, chest heaving, edges of a full panic attack crowding his vision. But what waited below dragged him through. When he and Chloe finally dropped onto the floor beside Declan, nobody spoke. They were standing inside a massive, hand-carved chamber. 50 feet across, easy. 20 feet from floor to ceiling. The air hung frigid and perfectly dead, but this was no cave. It was a bunker. Massive wooden support beams, soft with rot, braced a ceiling of smoothed limestone. Old kerosene lanterns dangled from heavy iron hooks, furred with oxidation. The floor had been graded flat and packed with crushed gravel. Sterling wasn't insane, Chloe whispered. Her flashlight traced the walls, her eyes enormous. This is industrial-scale excavation. How did they haul all this stone out through a crack that narrow? They didn't, Declan said, moving cautiously toward the room's center. __quote _29 __. A rusted, heavy-gauge mining cart sat in the middle of the chamber, thrown from a pair of iron rails that vanished into a rubble wall at the far end. But the cart wasn't what seized Wyatt's lungs. It was the western wall. Stacked against the stone, dozens of thick wooden crates, most rotting through, bound in corroded iron straps. Stamped into the decaying wood in faded black ink, quote 30, quote 31. Wyatt was already moving, half sprinting across the gravel. He dropped to his knees, quote 32, quote 33, Declan warned. A cold fist of dread clenched in his gut. The structural integrity down here was suspect at best, but it was something deeper that crawled under his skin. The sheer isolation of this place. Spaces built to conceal things of enormous value were never left unguarded. Wyatt didn't listen. He snatched a heavy chunk of loose limestone off the floor and brought it crashing down on the nearest crate's rusted lock. Once. Twice. On the third strike, the brittle iron exploded apart. He ripped the lid free, launching a plume of toxic, century-old dust into the still air. Inside, swaddled in disintegrating oilcloth, rows of dull, dense bars. Wyatt snatched one up, straining under the heft of it, and scraped the filth away with his thumb. Beneath the brutal whitewash of his headlamp, a flat yellow shimmer surfaced. Unmistakable. Wyatt breathed, then broke into manic laughter. He hoisted the bar overhead like he just won something. Deck, we're rich! You hearing me? My debts! Gone! We're millionaires! Chloe stepped closer, eyes locked on the bar. She wasn't smiling. Her face had drained of color. Quote 36. Quote 37. Wyatt's voice cracked off the stone walls like a whip. This has been sitting here since the roaring 20s. Nobody owns it. It's not abandoned, Declan said quietly. His flashlight wasn't aimed at the crates anymore. It was trained on the dark corner near the collapsed tunnel mouth. Chloe and Wyatt followed the beam. Propped against the rubble, half swallowed by loose gravel, sat a human skeleton. But that wasn't what froze Declan's blood solid. The bones weren't draped in 1920s work clothes. The skeleton wore a high-visibility yellow North Face rain jacket. Modern, synthetic, bright. A heavy-duty tactical backpack, the kind sold at any outdoor retailer today, sat beside it. On the skeletal wrist, an Apple Watch. Screen shattered, long dead. Chloe made a choked sound and stumbled 3 steps backward. Wyatt let the gold bar slip from his fingers. It struck the gravel with a dense, sickening thud. Somebody else found this place, Declan said, moving toward the body in slow, measured steps. And not in the 20s. Recently. He crouched beside the remains. The air carried a faint tang, metallic, sweet, wrong. Something caught the light near the skeleton's outstretched fingers. A heavy, matte black Glock 19. Slide locked back. Magazine spent. __quote _42 __, Declan muttered. He swept his beam across the rock wall behind them. Deep, fresh gouges scarred the limestone. Chloe's voice shook so hard each word came out fractured. Declan reached into the breast pocket of the decomposing jacket and extracted a mildewed leather wallet. He cracked it open. The driver's license inside had survived remarkably well. The name read Gregory Vance. No, not Vance. Declan thumbed the grit from the plastic. Gregory Miller. Issued in Maryland. Expiration date 2016, Declan said. His thoughts were spiraling. Wyatt whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. Declan dropped the beam lower. The skeleton's right femur was obliterated, crushed beneath a massive, perfectly rectangular limestone block that had dropped from above. But the longer Declan studied it, the clearer it became. That block hadn't fallen on its own. A thick, rusted steel cable connected it to the ceiling, threading through the darkness overhead, trailing all the way to the stack of crates. Declan said. Nausea rolled through him in a thick wave. He turned his head slowly toward Wyatt. Every muscle in Wyatt's face went slack. I don't know. I just hit it. A sound tore through the chamber. It began as a deep groan, like a submarine hull buckling under impossible pressure, then climbed into a shrill metallic scream. Run! Declan hurled himself toward Chloe. Overhead, the ceiling lurched. A dense curtain of white limestone powder cascaded over them, blinding every headlamp as the grinding shriek of ancient gears churning filled the void. The noise was annihilating, a concentrated earthquake pulsing up through the soles of their boots, rattling bone against bone. The ceiling didn't merely shift, it split. A colossal rectangular slab of limestone held for a century by iron friction pins wired to the booby-trapped crate tore free from the cavern roof. Declan threw himself over Chloe, cupping her skull as a barrage of pulverized stone hammered their backs like shrapnel. Wyatt clawed backward across the gravel, shrieking as the 2-ton block dropped. It struck the ground with a sound like the world cracking open. The impact detonated through the chamber like a buried charge, snuffing every spark of wonder and replacing it with raw, animal terror. A suffocating wall of white limestone dust devoured the space in an instant, headlamp beams bouncing back as a blinding, milky fog. For one agonizing minute, nothing existed but the ragged hacking of 3 sets of lungs and the soft patter of pebbles still raining from above. __quote _51 __. Declan choked through his bandana, dragging the cloth over his nose as he shoved himself off the gravel. His arms shook. __quote _52 __, Wyatt managed between coughs, voice raw, fractured with panic. She sat up, swatting at the dust, but her eyes weren't on him. They were locked on the impact site. Declan, the rope. He swung his beam toward the base of the rock slide. The massive limestone slab had hammered down directly at the bottom of the 45-degree incline they'd shimmied through. It sealed the bottleneck completely. Poking out from beneath that crushing weight, the frayed, severed tail of their static line. They were entombed. Wyatt lurched toward the boulder, slammed his gloved palms against cold stone and pushed, every muscle straining. Declan's voice came out flat, terrifyingly measured. That slab weighs 4,000 pounds minimum. We're not shifting it. We can't be trapped! The scream tore out of Wyatt, claustrophobia shattering whatever thin leash had held it. His headlamp swung wild across the dark walls. We'll suffocate down here. We have to dig through. Declan closed the distance and seized his brother by both shoulders. One hard shake. Look at me. Panic burns oxygen. Right now, oxygen is the most precious thing we own. We are not going back through that fissure. The trap did exactly what it was built to do. It sealed the vault. But there's moving air in here. Can you feel it? Chloe raised a trembling hand, wet her fingertip, held it still. He's right. The dust is migrating toward the back wall, toward the mining tunnel. Declan let go. Wyatt stood there pulling long, shuddering breaths, clawing his way back to composure. Okay, we take stock. Everything out of your pockets and packs, now. They clustered around the rusted mining cart, using its flatbed as a makeshift table. The inventory was brutal. Light. 3 headlamps with fresh batteries, 2 backup tactical flashlights, a dozen glow sticks. Water. 3 Nalgene bottles, each half empty. Food. 4 protein bars and a single bag of trail mix. Tools. 1 multi-tool, a folding camp knife, 50 feet of paracord, a compact first aid kit. We've got maybe 24 hours of light if we're disciplined, Declan said, staring at the pitiful spread. Water is the immediate crisis. But before we step into that tunnel, we need to understand what's waiting. He crossed back to the skeletal remains of Gregory Miller. Fresh dust had settled on the dead man's yellow jacket like a thin shroud. Declan knelt beside the ribcage and unzipped the tactical backpack. Inside, a handful of dead D-cell batteries, a crushed water bottle, and a thick, leather-bound moleskin notebook. He brushed grit from the cover and cracked it open. Pages warped with damp, ink bleeding at the margins. But the handwriting held, a logbook. Quote, _67, __. He angled the pages into the light so Chloe and Wyatt could read along. Declan turned the page. Declan stopped reading. A cold current threaded down his spine. He looked at the bottom of the page. The final entry was nothing but a single ragged stroke of ink dragging off the edge into nothing. Quote, _70, __. Chloe repeated, every instinct in her body firing at once. She sprinted to the eastern wall of the chamber and pressed her ear flat against the cold limestone. Eyes shut, listening hard. Quote, _71, ___. Quote, _72, ___. Wyatt asked, backing away from the crates of gold, suddenly terrified of them. Chloe said, words tumbling out fast. Declan and Wyatt pressed their ears against the stone. Faint but unmistakable. A deep, rhythmic rushing sound reverberating through solid rock. Like a freight train miles away, but closing fast. Chloe said, turning to face them with wide, terrified eyes. Quote 76. Quote 77. Declan commanded, stuffing Miller's journal into his own pack. Grab your gear. He turned toward the exit, then caught Wyatt lingering beside the shattered crate. His brother was frantically unzipping his backpack, cramming 3 heavy gold bullion bars into the main compartment. What the hell are you doing? Declan snapped. Drop the weight! It's 3 bars, Dec, Wyatt shot back, eyes blazing with desperate manic energy. Maybe 90 pounds total. I can handle it. I am not walking out of here empty-handed. I'd rather die down here than face the people I owe money to. You carry 90 extra pounds, you burn oxygen faster, you move slower, and you put me and Chloe in danger. Declan closed the distance between them, his voice dropping to something lethal and quiet. You want to die for it? Fine. But you will not kill us. He reached forward, seized Wyatt's pack, and violently inverted it. Gold bars struck the crushed gravel with heavy, dead thuds. Wyatt's water bottle and protein bars tumbled after them. Pick up your water, Declan said, staring his brother down. Leave the metal. Wyatt's fists clenched, jaw locked tight with fury. For one heartbeat, Declan was certain his brother would swing, but the low, rumbling vibration of approaching water beneath their feet shattered the standoff. Wyatt grabbed his water and food, eyes burning with pure venom, and shoved past Declan toward the dark mouth of the mining tunnel. __quote _87 __, Wyatt muttered. Declan and Chloe traded a deeply uneasy look. The mountain had trapped them, but the real threat might be the greed rotting inside it. The extraction tunnel was a jagged wound carved through the earth, roughly 6 feet high, 4 feet across. Rusted iron tracks, buckled and warped by decades of tectonic movement, ran down the center of the floor. The air here was nothing like the vault, damp, thick, humid, carrying the distinct metallic bite of iron oxide and decay. They moved single file, Declan on point, sweeping his flashlight across the ceiling for loose rock. Chloe in the middle, monitoring moisture on the walls. Wyatt at the rear, locked in tense, brooding silence. The deeper they pushed, the more the place confessed its history. They passed abandoned pickaxes with handles completely petrified by decades of dampness. At the quarter-mile mark, a rusted wheelbarrow loaded with rotting canvas sacks. The stenciled letters __quote _88 _ were barely legible on the decaying fabric. __quote _89 __, Declan observed, pausing beside a massive cast-iron smelting pot resting in a carved alcove. Chloe noted. She aimed her light upward. There had to be a major air shaft somewhere, a chimney to vent the smoke, Wyatt said bitterly from behind. Chloe stopped walking. She directed her beam down at her boots. She said, voice tight. Water was seeping up through the crushed gravel beneath the tracks. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, creeping, deliberate. Water gathering like a secret kept too long. Within seconds, their boot soles vanished under an inch of freezing, clouded runoff. Sluice gate, wide open, Chloe said, her breath coming faster. Lower chambers are flooding. It's pushing back into this tunnel. She turned to him. How fast did that journal say the water rose? It didn't, Declan answered, pulse hammering against his ribs. He moved faster. Step it up. We need to find ground that climbs. They broke into a punishing forced march. But the tunnel betrayed them, sloping downward, a geological cruelty dragging them deeper into the mountain along the rail line. The water climbed steadily. 10 minutes in, it lapped at their ankles. 10 minutes after that, it churned around their calves. It pulled at their clothes, stealing heat from muscle and bone. The cold wasn't passive, it was predatory, biting, relentless. At the half-mile mark, the tunnel walls fell away. A secondary cavern opened before them, nothing like the vault. This was an industrial graveyard in collapse. Massive wooden support beams had buckled beneath the mountain's weight, splintering into a jagged maze of fractured timber and fallen stone. A rusted steam engine squatted in the center, once powering some crude elevator system, now a monument to abandonment. But the far end of the chamber froze them where they stood. The floor dropped into a bowl-shaped depression, entirely drowned in dark, churning water. A thick mat of rotting wood and debris floated across the surface, and there, bobbing against the far wall, a skeleton. Not like Miller in the vault, no modern equipment. This body wore the disintegrating, algae-slicked remains of what appeared to be a 1920s tweed suit, the fabric mostly eaten away. A heavy leather satchel still hung diagonally across the ribcage, its weight dragging the torso beneath the waterline. Tobias Renton, Declan murmured, pulling the name from Miller's journal. Quote 101, quote 102. Wyatt's voice shook as the timeline snapped into focus. Miller was 2016. This skeleton is almost 100 years old. That's not Tobias. Miller said Tobias carried a modern pack. This man's been dead since Prohibition. Mayor Nathaniel Sterling, Chloe whispered, the horrible history clicking into place. He didn't just seal the vault. He sealed himself in when the operation collapsed. Or when he tried to run with the gold. The mountain claimed him too. Declan swept his flashlight along the flooded depression's perimeter. Quote, _108 ___, Chloe pointed. Across 40 feet of freezing water, a dark archway gaped in the rock face. Rusted iron rails sank into the pool on their side and climbed back out onto sloping stone just inside that archway on the other. Wyatt said, his voice cracked upward into panic. Declan said, he aimed his light back the way they'd come. The tunnel behind them surged now, aggressive, foaming white around the fallen timbers. We stay here, this room fills to the ceiling inside an hour. We cross now. Declan stripped his heavy coveralls. Thermal base layers only. He locked his headlamp tight, cinched his backpack straps, and stepped into the pool. The cold hit like violence. 100 needles driving through skin at once. His lungs emptied in a single involuntary gasp. Heads above water, he shouted back, teeth already slamming together. Don't let your core drop faster than it has to. He dog-paddled forward, shoving debris aside with each stroke. Chloe came next, a whimper escaping her as the water reached her waist, then her chest. She swam hard and steady. Years working in brutal aquatic conditions as a hydrologist had given her that. Wyatt stood at the edge. He looked behind him, water roaring into the tunnel, rising fast. Looked ahead, the black, freezing pool. Terror held him for one breath, then desperation won. He threw himself in. Declan's hand hit slick limestone on the far side first. He clawed up onto the wet rock ledge beside the archway, turned, and reached back. Chloe's fingers found his. He hauled her up beside him. She crumpled against the stone, her whole body seized with violent trembling. Wyatt, move, Declan bellowed, sweeping his beam across the water's surface. Wyatt was only halfway, thrashing hard. The soaked canvas of his jacket had become an anchor, dragging him deeper with every stroke. But something else was wrong. Quote, _116 __, Wyatt screamed, his skull disappearing beneath that black murk for one horrible second before he erupted back up, choking. Quote, _117 __, Declan's jaw tightened. His flashlight caught it, a dull yellow gleam beneath the waterline, stuffed inside the mesh side pocket of Wyatt's pack. He took the gold. When Declan had emptied the main compartment, Wyatt must have slipped a smaller ingot into that side pocket. The impossible density of the metal, combined with frozen water and waterlogged clothing, was dragging him to the bottom. Declan roared. Wyatt shrieked, flailing wildly, his face bone-white with raw terror. Quote, _121 __, Wyatt vanished again. This time, nothing came back up. The surface churned once. A few bubbles rose and burst. Silence. Quote, _122 __, Declan screamed, launching himself back into that freezing black water without hesitation. He drove his arms forward, swimming hard toward the spot where his brother disappeared. The cold was killing his limbs, turning every stroke sluggish and weak. He sucked one deep breath, fighting the reflex to gasp, and forced his head beneath the icy surface. His headlamp barely penetrated the swirling silt. He found Wyatt, eyes bulging with panic, fingers tearing uselessly at his chest strap. Declan seized the collar of his brother's jacket and hauled upward with everything his frozen body still possessed.